Hello and welcome, my name is Leah, I am a knitter based in West Wales in the UK. This is the Ruby and Pearls knitting channel and I'm coming to you today with another pattern roundup video. I am filming today the video on 20 colourwork sweaters that are not round yokes. So all these patterns are sweaters, not cardigans. Some of them are worked in various different constructions that we'll touch on in this video, but they're all not round yokes. And yes, the irony isn't lost on me, I am wearing a round yoke today, but I will be sharing some tips and tricks at the end of this video on how to make round yoke sweaters fit you better. If you are new here, you might not know this, but I have a lot of sensory issues with different sweater constructions. Specifically, round yokes cause me a lot of problems on my front neck. They ride up, they hit me at an awkward spot on my front neck, and I find them really, really uncomfortable to wear. And therefore I have been scouring the internet and going through pages and pages on Ravelry to try and find some patterns that are not round yokes, that have a better fit on the front neck specifically, and that are interesting to knit and interesting to look at. So I have 20 patterns for you today. We're going to have some patterns that you've probably seen before and also some patterns that might be new to you. So grab yourself a nice drink and let's jump right in. If you've not seen a pattern roundup by me before, I just want to briefly mention that I will be putting pictures here on the screen as well as the title and the name of the designer. I will also be putting a bundle link down below in the description box that you can click on where you can see all the extra details on these patterns on Ravelry. I am not going to be sharing too many numerical details with you in this video because I find them extremely tedious to listen to when I watch other people's videos. So I'm just going to share the basics with you. What kind of construction, what kind of yarn weight, and anything interesting that is worth mentioning. But like I say, if you want to know more, check out the link down below. Let's jump in. And first off, I want to talk to you about the Rosie sweater by Lilahama, also known as Le Knit. And you have probably seen this sweater because it has been massively viral lately. It's been in the tops of 20 on Ravelry for a very long time, and for good reason, because it's absolutely beautiful. I have actually cast this sweater on. It's currently dormant, but we won't talk about that today. This is a DK weight gauge sweater. It is worked top down. It has a fair amount of positive ease, and you work sort of the back yoke first and then the front yoke. You join it and then eventually you pick up stitches along the side and work the sleeve at the same time, and you kind of work a raglan at this point, and that is where the colourwork starts. And it features these two bands of beautiful, beautiful rose colourwork, and it is just an absolutely gorgeous pattern. And the only thing worth mentioning, if you are a sort of more beginner colourwork knitter, this might not be the pattern for you. It is not the most intuitive chart. The chart repeats are very, very long, and I think you will achieve the best results using ladder back jacquard. So I would highly recommend that you look that method up on YouTube and watch some tutorials. But yeah, it's not doable if you're a beginner colourwork knitter, but maybe it might be a good idea to go for something a little bit more geometric first. The next pattern I would like to share with you is the Little Crystals by Celine Phaeton. Again, a pattern that you've probably seen all over the internet. It's been out for a couple of years now nearly, and it is a top-down worsted weight drop shoulder design. So I believe part of the yoke is worked flat in this design, but it is a very geometric short repeat kind of design across the top where you're working it flat. So it shouldn't be too difficult. Just make sure that you keep an even tension also on the purl side. I think that is the one thing that's a little bit challenging with flat colourwork. There is this beautiful band of snowflakes that goes across the top of the chest, and otherwise it's a fairly simple type of colourwork, but I think it's really, really striking, and depending on what colours you might choose, it might also be quite festive. So yes, this is worsted weight, worked on a 5mm needle, and I think it's a very, very beautiful pattern. Let's talk about the Kerr sweater by Rebecca Clow from the Cray Bear podcast. This has been out for several years now, I think 3 years. It is a top-down DK weight pattern, and it is a drop shoulder pattern where just after you join the body in the round at the underarm, you create this band of geometric colourwork. I think it's really, really striking. And then you do the same thing on the sleeves. You work some short rows so that they line up nicely from the body to the sleeves. And I just think this is an absolutely beautiful pattern. I would highly recommend that you knit this. I have knit this sweater before, and it was very, very fun to knit. I just chose the wrong size and ended up not wearing it. That's why it's not in my possession anymore. But fully size inclusive as well. Recommends a 4mm needle on DK weight. And there are different charts as well. You can choose whether you want wider or shorter colour work. So definitely one to consider. And while we're talking about Rebecca Clow, let's talk about the Rue sweater, which is also a DK weight top-down sweater in colour work, in 2 colours again. But this one is worked as a contiguous yoke. So I think there is sort of a saddle shoulder type construction, but it is worked contiguously, so you do some rapid increases on either side of a saddle before then turning it into increases on the sleeve and then into a raglan. It's a very beautiful shoulder fit, and I think this is a very striking, very interesting pattern, and this one will probably be fairly easy to knit if you're a beginner colourwork knitter, just because it's very geometric and will definitely keep you engaged, and it would be really handy for those sort of odd quantities of yarn that we have, because you don't need a full sweater quantity of either of these colours, but they are quite evenly distributed within the sweater. So yes, this is another beautiful pattern by Rebecca. Let's talk about the Iris sweater by Trin Annalee. Now, you've probably seen this sweater all over the internet. It is extremely beautiful, but it is very, very involved. So it's not for the faint of heart. And it is a light fingering weight gauge. So this will take you a long, long, long time to knit. But it is absolutely gorgeous. And I believe that some of this might be steeked. Let me just double check. Yes, I think it is worked top down, but you will end up having to steek the armholes. So bear that in mind in your yarn choice. You might want something quite woolly, that is easy to cut, that won't unravel that easily. And I think the designer recommends Holskan Super Soft, and there are loads of beautiful colours in that yarn. And I think you can buy them in really small quantities and in really large quantities as well, in cones. So this is definitely an ideal yarn for this pattern, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I don't really know what else to say about this, other than it will take a long time. It's a 28.5 stitch gauge, so just be prepared that you're going to be working on this for a while, but it will definitely be a beautiful piece in your wardrobe. If you would like something less intense, how about the Sennen sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl? This is also a DK weight pattern. It is a drop shoulder, and it has a beautiful scooped neck and interesting decrease elements on the sleeves. And it features these bands of little wavy colour work going across the body and the sleeves. And I just think this is really interesting because it's interesting to knit. There's a lot of fun elements within this pattern, but this won't be tricky to knit. If you've never done any colour work before, I think this would be a really good sort of entry-level pattern. And Sophie from the Knit Pearl Girl, she writes quite extensive patterns. There is normally lots of information in there, lots of tips and tricks and things. So yeah, I would highly recommend that you check this one out specifically if you are a beginner. Another pattern that has less colour work but is really striking in my opinion is the Halftone pullover by Indigo Knits. This is also a fingering weight sweater, so it will take a little while to knit. It is worked in Jamieson's and Smith jumper weight yarn, so a light kind of fingering gauge, but it has this beautiful little bit of colour work going across the centre of the body and the sleeves, and it sort of just transitions the 2 colours together. So again, it would be really good if you've got some awkward quantities of yarn that aren't quite enough for a full sweater but are too much for something else. Or maybe you've got 2 quantities in your stash that are sort of, you bought them for slipovers, but you would actually like to make a sweater instead. So this would be a very, very good pattern for that. Next, we have a free pattern on the Filcolana website. This is the Vilma sweater, or just Vilma, by Maria Bach-Jensen. It is a DK weight gauge. The designer used Filcolana Arvetta and Telia, so 2 very well-known yarns from Filcolana. And I think this one's really cool because first of all it's free, but also it's a raglan sweater, and the colour work all just happens further down on the body and on the sleeves. So you've got the engagement of the different bits of increases on the yoke, and then once you sort of reach the boring part of the sweater, you get all this really interesting colour work to work. So this would definitely be one that I would check out, especially because it's also a free pattern. There are lots of free patterns on the Filcolana website actually, so definitely worth having a look at. Let's move on to the Alaska sweater by Camille Descotor, maybe? I hope I pronounced that correctly. This is a DK weight raglan sweater. I think it's worked top down. Yes, it is worked top down. And it has this really beautiful forest motif on the bottom of the sweater and on the bottom of the sleeves. It is very cropped. I would personally probably knit this a little bit longer, maybe a bit more oversized than in the pattern photos. But I think the sort of pine forest at the bottom is just really, really gorgeous. It's really different. It is not overly geometric. There are some repeats, as you can see in the chart there. So the trees sort of repeat fairly regularly across the bottom. But again, one of those sweaters that would be really good for somebody who, like me, gets a little bit bored once you reach the bottom of sleeves and the body, because all the fun stuff has happened at the top. So yes, another wonderful pattern to consider. Let's talk about the Sunset Sweater by Camry Cutler. This is a really, really cool design. It is a drop shoulder worsted weight top down sweater. So you do all the shaping, all the creating of the yoke, a bit of short rows on the top of the sleeve, and then you've got these bands of colourwork. So a little bit like the Kerr in kind of the same construction type, but Camry used these really different sort of geometric bands of colour, and she designed the yarn as well and dyed the yarn for this sweater. So I think that's really, really cool. And there are loads of fun colour combinations that the testers used, also to be seen on Ravelry. So this is a really, really cool, really striking design, especially that sort of zigzaggy motif. I find really, really beautiful. The other yarn that she recommends is Cascade 220 or Malabrigo yarn worsted, so not just her own yarns. But I think this would be really cool if you've got some single skeins as well that you could use within this colourwork. How about something completely different? This is the New Boar by Elena Solier-Jansa. Maybe that's how you pronounce it. Probably not, but I've given it a go. I do apologise if I got that wrong. This is a fingering weight sweater, and it actually features some intarsia as well as some stranded colour work, and it is worked top down. I think this is really, really striking. So it's fingering weight, but it's a 24 stitch gauge, so it's not too small, and I think worked on 3.75mm needles. So it features this really shallow v-neck and then a little button placket at the front, and then it has this really cool, almost insect-like geometric colourwork. I think it's really, really striking, and it is across the bottom of the body but also on the little saddle shoulder. So I believe the saddle shoulder part is probably done in intarsia and then the bottom is done in stranded colourwork, but for the same exact motif. So several different constructions and different techniques you could practice within this sweater, but then there's also lots of stockinette in between, and there are 12 sizes in this pattern, so I think that is really, really cool. The next sweater I would like to share with you is the Norfolk sweater by Iris Hardedge, I think is her name, and this is a Aran weight sweater. So it's an 18 stitch gauge. She recommends a DK and a lace held together on a 5mm needle, and I think this is really cool because it is a sort of contiguous yoke construction. So you do all the sort of shaping first in one colour, so you don't have to work any colour work flat as far as I can see, and then there are bands of colour work alternating with a little bit of garter stitch, I believe it is, and then more bands of colour work. So I think this is really, really cool. It's very different. It's not something that I've seen. I haven't seen many sweaters like this. I think the only thing I can think of is maybe the terracotta sweater by Lynette, which alternates between texture and colour work. But I think this would be really, really engaging to knit. You would just keep wanting to reach the next bit and the next bit. And very size inclusive as always for Iris's patterns. So definitely something that I would consider knitting. She's also got photos of a more neutral version and a more sort of striking colour version. So really, really cool to see those different types on there. The next pattern I'd like to share with you is the Biscrim sweater by, I think she goes by Nash Knits. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce her full name. And Nash Knits is actually a designer who mainly designs children's wear, but really, really cool, really well thought out with neat details and all the finishings that you sort of expect from an adult garment. So if you want sort of really professional, beautiful children's wear, I definitely recommend that you check out Nash Knits. And every now and then when the demand is high, she will make an adult version of a certain sweater, and the Biscrim sweater is one of those. And I remember she first released the kids one, and I think it's really, really cool, and I would really like to knit this. I'm not entirely sure about, in the adult version, about the A, low contrast, and B, the fact that it's all fuzzy, because I think she held Drops Sky and Drops Alpaca Silk together, so very, very fuzzy, and that obviously sort of blends the colour work a little bit more. In the children's version, she used much more smooth yarn, and I think I would use more smooth yarn for mine. So this is worked top down, I believe, and it is an oversized sweater, seamlessly top down, yeah. And the yoke is done in, I believe, half fisherman's rib, which is really, really cool. It's a totally different texture. Then you go into this sort of 2x2, I think, colour work on the body, and it is just columns of 2 colours. It's really, really simple, but it's really, really effective. And I highly recommend that you also go and check out her kids' versions of this one, because I think it's really, really cool. So definitely a pattern that I would like to have on my to knit list. The next sweater I'd like to share with you is the Lilahama sweater, or Lilahama pullover by MG Wilms. She goes by Ellis Knitwear, and she makes lots of really, really beautiful colourwork sweaters. She also does some other designs. I think she does some cables as well, but she's mostly known for her colourwork sweaters. And I believe this one is worked bottom up. Let me have a look. Yes, I think it's worked bottom up, and I think you steek the armholes for this one. It features this beautiful all over colour work, and it is a DK weight pattern, so it will take you a little while to knit, but I think it would be absolutely worth it. And it has this beautiful star motif alternating with this sort of dot motif across the body, and I think it's very reminiscent of sort of Scandinavian designs, hence the name. If you are that way inclined, there is now also a cheeky Christmas sweater version of this one, so I think you can purchase both of them and insert the charts from the cheeky Christmas sweater into this one if you fancy that. So definitely go check that one out as well. The next sweater is the Bliss sweater by Irene Lynn. This is a worsted gauge sweater worked top down. It is a drop shoulder, and it has again colour work across the body, and that sort of blends into the colour work on the sleeves. And it features, I think, 2 contrast colours, yeah, and 1 main colour, and it's really, really striking and a little bit different, I think. And I actually knit this sweater, but had to abort it because I was totally off gauge. But I thoroughly enjoyed the construction, and it was very well written and easy to understand. And the only thing I would tell you to be mindful of with Irene Lynn is that she often models several different sizes. So make sure you sort of properly read which kind of amount of positive ease you would like for your version, because she will often model, I don't know if it's herself in the photos, but the model in the photos will often wear different versions of the same sweater in different sizing. That is what I'm trying to point out. The next sweater is a fingering weight sweater, and it is the Calamondin by Audrey Borrego. If you're not familiar with Audrey Borrego, she used to be a designer and she stopped designing, and now all her patterns are for free on Ravelry, but they were all thoroughly tech edited and tested. They were all size inclusive, and they were all sort of written to a standard that obviously was, you know, created paid for patterns, right? And only because she decided that she doesn't want to design anymore, she's now put them out for free. So they are excellent patterns, and I would highly recommend that you check out her library. But this is a raglan style sweater, worked top down, and it has bands of colour work again. There seem to be a lot of bands of colour work in my roundup, and she alternates between different kinds of colour work. I just think this is a very, very beautiful pattern, but it is fingering weight at a 26 stitch gauge rather, so just be aware of that. And if you are prepared to invest the time into a fingering weight sweater, Why not one with 28.5 stitch gauge? This is the Sheep Sweater by Rosa Pomar. And Rosa Pomar is a yarn producer, but evidently they also design garments. And this is such a cool design. And I really, really, really want this in my wardrobe, but I don't know if I want to knit it. It is worked bottom up, and I believe it is steeked. Yeah, the armholes are steeked, hence the drop shoulder kind of construction. But it has these rows of sheep that are grazing, and then there are little lambs dotted in between. And I think it would be so cool if you duplicate stitch some of these lambs in different colours as well, or put little flowers in. I just love this design. I think it's so, so cool. But it would be a lot of work. Obviously the yarn recommended is a Rosa Pomar yarn. You'll be working this on 3mm needles, and then the ribbing's on 2.25, so a major labour of love. But I think I might have to consider that one day. If you like an unusual construction, how about the Medokvit by Teti Lutsak? Teti Lutsak has lots of interesting looking designs. I always find that when I see her designs, they are very striking and you can sort of immediately associate them with her. So she has a very specific look, and this design is no different. It features these bands of colourwork that sort of come down and across and up and then round the back. And I have no idea how this is constructed, but she says it is modular and it's worked flat. So I'm not 100% sure how the colourwork is done, but I have a feeling that the colourwork strip is actually done in the round, and then you sort of pick up from there and do the texture patterns. So really, really interesting looking design. It is a sport weight design on a 24 stitch gauge. So again, it will take you a fair amount of time to knit. But if you like something very unusual looking and very unique, then I definitely would recommend this pattern. Two more to go. First, the Heart Prism Sweater by Celine Phaeton. I already mentioned to you earlier the Little Crystals by Celine Phaeton, and this is another colourwork sweater that she brought out much more recently. I have purchased this pattern and I do intend to knit this at some point. And again, it is one of those patterns that has sort of a different colour for the top half than the bottom half, and then they merge in the middle with some colourwork. So very, very cool design. There are two versions in this pattern, depending on whether you would like the heart motif or not. And I don't know why she offers these two versions, but my best guess is that maybe the heart version was a little bit leaning more feminine, and she wanted this to be sort of a gender neutral pattern because there are also men modelling this sweater. And it is worked top down, and all the colourwork's worked in the round. So again, it's one of those, a little bit like the Kerr sweater or the Sunset sweater. You do the yoke, you join the round, you do the colourwork, you do a little bit of short rows on the upper sleeve before moving into the colourwork on the sleeve as well. This is a DK weight pattern at a 22 stitch gauge. Well, she says sport, but I believe 22 stitches in colourwork is more of a DK gauge for me. The last pattern, and I hope the dog hasn't knocked the tripod. The last pattern I would like to share with you is one that I am ready to cast on. I've just purchased the pattern. It came out yesterday, and it is the Winter Soul Sweater by Adorable Knits, or Dorothy Officier. And this is an absolutely stunning pattern that's been teased over and over and over on Instagram for months, and I have been waiting and waiting to knit this. It is worked in Madrogan Puno Fine, which is a worsted weight yarn at a 20 stitch gauge. So I think you could kind of vary things up a bit. Would you like it to be DK? Would you like it to be Aran or worsted? And sort of, you know, figure your way out with this one. But yes, 20 stitch gauge. It's a raglan design, and it has pretty much all over colourwork, apart from at the very top where you're working part of the raglan flat, I believe. And then it is just bands and bands of different colourwork. And it is so striking, it's so cool. I particularly like the versions with high contrast. So you do all these bands, and so they do sort of repeat themselves, but they just look so interesting. They look really striking, and just, I haven't really seen a pattern like this for a while. So when this was first teased, I immediately knew I had to knit this. It's knit on a 5mm needle, as I say, in worsted weight, and yeah, I cannot wait to cast this on. I will be knitting this next month, I believe. So if you are also going to knit the Winter Soul Sweater and you've also been waiting for it to come out, please do let me know in the comments down below. Before we finish up this video, I would like to share with you some tips and tricks on how to make round yokes fit you a little bit better, hence why I am wearing a round yoke. Now, the one problem I have with this sweater is actually that I washed it and I think it shrunk a little bit. I washed most of my garments in the washing machine, but I don't know if I put this one on the wrong setting. So my sleeves are a bit short now. That's not the only problem I have with this sweater, actually. It's extremely itchy. So I don't know if I'm going to be keeping this sweater forever, but there we are. This is the Celeste sweater by Petite Knit, and I have knit this sweater twice. I only wear this version because the other version has a little crew neck, and that is the tip I wanted to talk to you about. So as you can see with this one, it has a funnel neck. That's how it was designed, and the look of it is a little bit iffy, right? It can sort of flare out, do little bumpy things, but basically if you struggle with round yoke constructions and round yoke sweaters hitting you awkwardly on the neck, quite often it can be that the whole weight of the sweater is kind of hanging there and is pushing against your jugular, and it's just not pleasant. But if you put a funnel neck on it, or even a full turtleneck, that whole sensation kind of disappears because it doesn't sit there. It touches your neck all over, and it's hard to explain, but it is way more pleasant. That's tip number one. Tip number two, put in more short rows. Add some extra short rows at the upper back. Add some more short rows after the yoke. So this design actually has short rows after the yoke. The important thing is that you do them before you split the sleeve so that the whole yoke gets tilted and not in an awkward way with the sleeves in the middle. You can also extend the short rows there. You can even add short rows into the ribbing. That is also an option. So that's tip number two, put loads of short rows in. Tip number three, size up. I find that when round yokes hit me awkwardly, especially start bunching here and wanting to ride up, is because I've got the wrong size. And for a round yoke specifically, it's really important to consider the width from shoulder tip to shoulder tip. And I actually have a small bust compared to the rest of the measurements of my body. So generally speaking, I have a small for bust, but a medium for everything else. And lots of designs are based entirely off of bust circumference. So it's really important that you become a little bit more familiar with your dimensions and figure out, is your bust actually indicative of the other measurements of your upper body? So if you find that round yokes don't fit you very well and bunch in awkward places and ride up, it can often mean it's because the shoulder width that you actually have isn't accounted for by your bust circumference. So bear that in mind. I find sizing up and using a really drapey yarn that kind of wants to hang down really works well. Or you could also pick designs that have a slightly bigger neck opening. The other thing that I would highly recommend that you do, tip number four, is that you don't knit the collar first. Even if the design tells you to knit the collar, just cast on for the yoke and knit the yoke. And then you can try it on later. Even when it's blocked, you can knit the whole thing, block it, figure out how high this neckline now comes, and then figure out what kind of neckline you would like to add. It might just be an I-cord bind off. That might be enough, and that might not ride up too far. So I hope these tips are helpful for you. Make a turtle or mock neck. Make sure you put lots of short rows in. Check your size, and maybe add the collar at the end. Those are my tips and tricks on how to make round yokes fit you better. Because let's be honest, I'd say about 80% of all Colourwork sweaters out there are round yokes, and that is because you can hide the increases or decreases, depending on how it's constructed, extremely well in a round yoke, whereas you can't hide them in any other construction. There are clear lines in a raglan, there are clear lines in a drop shoulder, and that's fine as long as you make your design work around those. But if you want this beautiful seamless look, like on this sweater, you need a round yoke. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope you found some new patterns, or patterns that you've known about but forgotten about. And let me know if you're going to cast any of these on. I also hope that you found some of these tips and tricks useful. If you like to listen about tips and tricks on how to make garments fit you better, please subscribe down below and give me a like. I talk about fit on garments all the time in my regular podcast. So with that, I wish you a lovely afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are, and happy knitting, and see you soon. Bye-bye.